Hey guys, Yankee here, and today I'm going to be giving my thoughts on Digimon Ghost Game episodes 30 and 31. So, episode 30, we open up with a girl who, she was just like tearing up stuff in her room. And through the episode, we learn that she is a schoolgirl. She goes to school with Ruri and her friends and is friends with one of Ruri's friends. Like, they're close. And we learn that she's stopped going to school. Why? We don't really know. Like, they try and give answers in the episode. There's a point where it's like, well, her new teacher, she didn't get along with him. But then the episode also makes it seem like she's just jealous that her friends are now hanging out with Ruri. Um, so it's not quite clear. But she's upset. She's not going to school. And then, like, out of her closet, Warumanzemon and X-Tyrannomon just walk out. And they sort of become her Digimon without her actually being, like, a tamer or anything. They say that they're friends, but she's using them like they were her own Digimon, kind of, right? So, what is her name again? Kayano? Her dad comes into her room and is going to talk to her, and X-Tyrannomon turns him into a doll. And that's sort of like the horror element of this episode, where we just get a bunch of people turning into dolls. And before I really talk about the rest of the episode, I like the design of the little dolls they turn into, especially later on when Kyoshiro and Jellymon get turned into dolls. I think those are really neat looking. They're like kind of like this weird mix of odd looking and cute, and I just kind of like them. So anyway, that's the episode. Schoolgirl has shut herself in and is using Digimon to basically turn... It started with people that were bothering her into dolls, and then it just becomes her turning everybody into dolls. And I don't really have a lot of notes for this episode, besides Monzemon is also in it. This episode was... it was not terrible, but sitting here and trying to talk about it, it's like, it's kind of a mess. Again, the reason why she sort of holed herself up in her room is unclear. Her getting the Digimon and then using them to sort of just turn people to dolls and stuff, I like that. I think this is the first time in the show where we have a human basically getting their own Digimon and then using them maliciously. It kind of reminded me... it's not too similar, but I thought of the episode in Digimon Savers where, like, the bank robbers just bump into a Dromojimon and then they just bring him along and have him help them get into safes and stuff and ATMs. And I kind of like that, and I hope we get more of that, where people meet Digimon, they become friends, but they just aren't well-intentioned. Because up until this point, we really haven't had that, at least to my recollection. The only episode that kind of comes close to that was the Yatagaramon episode, where the guy that likes birds meets a Yatagaramon that wants to free a bunch of birds, and so he just sort of follows along, though. So yeah, we have Warumanzemon, X-Tyrannomon, Monzemon. That was cool. I like having them all in an episode. I think the fight was meh. Having Monzemon just be like the good guy, though, is nice. I don't think he's ever really like a villain. I think he was a villain in Adventure. I don't really remember. But he's sort of like the go-to vaccine type bad guy. So that was neat to have him facing off against Warumanzemon and X-Tyrannomon. I really like all their designs, and again, this episode's a mess. The Ghost Game has a problem with endings, but the ending of this episode was also kind of meh. Monzemon just uses his, like, heart attack. I forget what it was called. And now suddenly Warumanzemon and X-Tyrannomon aren't trying to cause trouble anymore. And we learn that that's sort of their entire motivation. Kayano sees them as her friends. They sort of have that, like, they say that they're her friends. And then Monzemon allows her to overhear them saying, like, the only reason we hang out with her is because she lets us do whatever we want. And the lesson is, you're not, like, you're not friends if you just let people step all over you and push you around, push you into doing what they want all the time. It was not a great episode. I liked some parts of it, but on the whole, it wasn't very good. I'm actually being a bit harder on it than I was when I watched it. Like, talking about it now, I'm liking it less. I like ideas in it, but it's not very good. Episode 31. This one is also a bit messy. Boy, these two episodes were not great. So, this episode opens with Angormon reading a book in Ruri's house. And I don't remember what he says about it exactly, but he mentions, like, some shrine, which obviously comes into play later in the episode, because why else would they bring that up? And he also, like, is talking about, like, a fight. It's like a samurai novel, right? Where two samurai are fighting. And so this episode is all about a sword that is, like, possessing Digimon to then attack humans. So when we first see it, we get, I think it's a Goblimon cutting down a human, and then we see the human getting absorbed into the sword. And then we see, a little bit later, Goblimon challenging, let me see here, Hanuman, which I think is often translated as just Apemon, because that's what I kind of remember him as. So Goblimon challenges Hanuman to a fight, and then we don't get to see the results, really, and then later on we see Hanuman now holding the sword that Goblimon had. And so the sword is getting passed on. So it went from that Goblimon to that Hanuman, and then eventually Angormon gets possessed by it. And a lot of this episode is just him fighting to try and, like, not even get free, but just to not hurt people. Before that, though, before Angormon gets the sword, we're reintroduced to his little group of Digimon friends that he has meetings with. One of those Digimon being Repamon, who was the villain in an episode way back. And obviously it makes sense to reintroduce him here because, like, his tail's like a blade, and his whole episode was like a fight where they're like, he's fighting with himself, right? Like, the body and the tail are two separate beings, and they were fighting. So put him in here, Angormon attacks him, and it's not really a fight. And I'll say this, the animation in this episode was not very good. Definitely not for, like, this sword fighting that they try and do towards the end. Like, animation just wasn't really here this episode. But yeah, Repamon's brought in, that was cool. And then eventually, sort of the climax of this episode all happens at the shrine that Angormon had mentioned at the beginning of the episode. But yeah, so the sword is possessing Digimon, and we learned that the sword was actually Musyamon's, and when he came into the real world from the digital world, he just sort of got fused into his sword. So he was trying to get people to cut down humans by possessing them so he could free himself, I think? I think that's what happened. What else do I have here? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so another thing that's been happening this episode is we keep seeing Zubamon just sort of in the shadows, like watching Angormon try and fight what we now know is Musyamon, like fight his control. And so the culmination of this episode is a sword fight, just like the book that Angormon was reading at the beginning. We have Musyamon, who is now free from his sword, holding his sword, and then we have Simbarangormon, who then gets to wield Zubamon, who, in the past, Musyamon and Zubamon had fought, and Zubamon had lost, and so this is a rematch. And here we go, here's the epic fight, and no, it's just like, they charged each other, and then they're on the opposite sides of each other, and then Musyamon's sword breaks. And that's it. Again, animation wasn't really here for this episode. The actual plot of the episode was fine. I think Zubamon coming in, like, it was neat to have him turn into a sword. Like, that's Zubamon's whole thing, is he become a sword, right? What are they called? The legend arms, where they're just weapons that people can wield. Having him pop up and sort of be the sword that Angormon uses to fight Musyamon, that's fine. The resolution, though, being like, Zubamon, like, they mentioned that Zubamon got scarred by Musimon, and then Angoramon and Zubamon break Musimon's blade, and that's enough for Zubamon, and he just leaves. And then the Black Tailmon shows up, delivers a letter to Hiro from his dad, and then Musimon just, like, goes with him. So yeah. This episode was whatever. The letter from Hiro's dad, which I don't remember if they had specified what the letter Hiro sent to his dad said, but basically Hiro says that he sent his dad a letter asking him for advice on what to do with, like, really strong Digimon. And Hokuto's letter is on a leaf, first of all, and it just says, I don't know, figure it out. So, Hokuto, this whole series, useless. You're useless. But yeah, that's the episodes. Nothing too spectacular. I'd say these are probably two pretty weak ones. Like, episode 31 in particular wasn't great. And it felt like a great setup for Angoramon's evolution, which we just didn't get. So, again, I don't know. These two episodes were meh. Some ideas from the episode 30 were there, and I hope they revisit that. Like, people teaming up with Digimon to do not great things. And episode 31 is just, like, it was a good, not even horror, but it, like, had a good setup for, like, a, I guess, horror, yeah, a good setup for, like, a horror plot where people get possessed by a sword that they grab and they kill people. Cool, but it just wasn't very good. But yeah, those are my thoughts on these two episodes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.